Hi everybody, welcome to our live crochet event. I'm Brenda KB Anderson, and did you know that March is National Craft Month? Well, it is, and it's the first day of March, so we are going to celebrate. Today we are making the celebration beanie. This is what it looks like. Here's the real one. This is what it looks like. So if you want to follow along with the pattern, you can go ahead and download that pattern. The link, you'll find the link for the pattern in the description. So you can check that out now, or if you want to wait till later, it'll still be there for you to download later, so that's okay too. All right, so let me just describe this to you a little bit. First of all, this cute little beanie has a nice little fold-up brim to make things extra warm. And of course, you probably noticed the gigantic pom-pom on this beanie. I really wanted to have a huge one because I wanted this to be like a really extra hat. Like, I wanted it to be, you know, obviously there's sequins. I wanted it to be like you're having a big celebration and somebody just dumped a bunch of shiny confetti on your head and you're having fun. It's like a party hat, right? So this hat comes in sizes all the way from baby to an adult large, so you can make one for everyone. And it is made with fingering weight yarn. So fingering weight yarn is a thinner yarn than what we typically find in the big box stores. You can still find fingering weight yarn there though, but it is thinner. But don't let that scare you if you don't really like crocheting with thinner yarns. That's okay, because we're going to be holding the yarns together, so we're able to use a larger hook. So it's kind of like you're crocheting with worsted weight yarn or like a heavier DK weight yarn with those two strands held together. The reason that we're doing that is because we're adding the sequins, and the sequins have a very tiny hole in them. And so in order to thread the sequins onto the yarn, which is how we get them onto the hat, we needed a thinner yarn to go through that hole. So we're going to be threading the sequins all onto one strand of yarn and holding it together with a second strand of yarn, and then we're going to be crocheting with them held together. All right, so your materials, you're going to need 2 or 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. And all the specifics of the yarns that I used, exactly how much, all the materials. There's some extra links for where I got the sequins, and then this gigantic pom-pom. Those links are also in your pattern, so you can take a look at that. The yarn brand and everything is in there. But just to give you the general overview, you're going to need 2 or 3 skeins of fingering weight yarn. You're going to need a handful of sequins. Or like maybe like a few tablespoons full of sequins, if you can imagine that a little bit better. And then you're going to need a needle that is small enough to go through the hole in the sequin, like just a sewing needle, a thinner needle. You're going to need a larger needle. You're going to need a tapestry needle for weaving in your ends, and of course the pom-pom. And I would recommend, if you're making a smaller size hat, think about the proportion of the pom-pom. So if you're making a baby size hat, you might not want the super huge pom-pom on the hat. You could, and actually that would be really adorable. But just, I just don't want there to be any surprises when you go and put the pom-pom to the hat. Just think about the proportion of that before you make your decision. So this is the very large one I used, and here is more like the standard size that you can easily find all over the place. You can find these in craft stores, you can find them on Amazon, they're all over the place. So this is more the standard size. I think it's about 4 inches. And when they say how wide they are, I think they're measuring from most of the wisps way out here. They're not measuring the small part in the middle, the dense part in the middle. All right, anyway, so let's see. The other thing you're going to need are some kind of pins or something to keep your pieces together, because we're going to be doing a little bit of sewing at the end of this project. All right, so we're not sewing the sequins on though. Don't worry about that. All right, so let's get started. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to thread a bunch of sequins onto your yarn, onto one strand of your yarn. Okay, so imagine I just have these 2 small balls of yarn because I was kind of running low on my yarn, but at the beginning of your project, you would be using 2 of the larger skeins, 2 of the full skeins. All right, so to get the sequins on, because yarn is kind of squishy and fuzzy, you're not going to be able to thread that through your sequin very well. So you can use a needle and thread, just a short piece of thread, doesn't need to be very long, you don't need to measure it really. And then you're just going to tie a knot in the end of, tying the 2 ends together. Just going to do a little overhand knot here. And so what you're doing is you're creating a loop out of thread. And that is going to allow us to tuck the end of the yarn through. We're going to put the end of the yarn through that loop and double it back on itself like this. So what you've got is you have your needle connected to a loop of thread, and then you have the yarn tucked through the loop of thread and going to your yarn ball. Just ignore these sequins that I already put on there. Pretend those didn't happen yet. All right, so then you're going to take your yarn needle and thread them right through the center of those sequins. And if you're lucky, you can grab kind of a clump of them and hold them together and thread a bunch on at once. But that doesn't always work. This does take time. I should mention this project. If you're looking for a super quick fix, this is not going to be the project for you. This is more of a, you need a little bit of patience to get these sequins on there. You're not going to be able to crochet as fast as you normally do with these sequins. It's not hard to do, but it does take a little more time. So just a heads up on that. All right, so you're going to just slide your sequins onto your needle, and I like to slide them on with the cupped side of the sequin, the concave side of the sequin towards me, so I'm putting the point through that concave part of the sequin. But if you want to do it the opposite way, or if you want to put them on randomly and you just don't really want to care, that's fine too. I wouldn't sweat, I wouldn't worry about getting every one of them absolutely perfect. If you thread some on backwards, you're not going to notice because the sequins kind of flip around a little bit. They catch the light. It's not going to look super uniform. You're not going to notice if one sequin is upside down. You're really not. So I would not bother worrying about that, but I think it does help if you kind of have a system and you're sliding your needle through the cupped side of the sequin first. All right, so you get a number of sequins on there. You can put even more on there if you want to. And then you're just going to slide them down along the thread and through onto the yarn. And so if you're going to be threading a bunch more, which I recommend you do about a tablespoon at a time, I would leave some sequins here because that basically holds your yarn in place, and it's going to keep your yarn from falling out of this loop, and you can move it all around. It's not going to fall out. So once you get that anchored, then you can thread some more sequins onto your needle. So just do that until you get bored of putting the sequins on, or you get about a tablespoon worth of sequins. You don't want to have, at first when I started making this hat, I thought, oh, I'll put all the sequins onto the yarn first, then I'll have them all ready to go. It's going to be the most efficient way to do it, but actually it turned out that it was less efficient because you have to keep moving those sequins down as you are crocheting with them. You have to keep sliding them down your yarn, and it gets to be a little annoying if there's too many sequins. It creates more friction and it's harder to slide them along your yarn strand. So in the pattern I did recommend, about a tablespoon at a time or something like that. You could even do a little more if you wanted to, but I would not try to estimate how many sequins you need for the entire hat and put just all of the sequins on. I would not do that. It's not gonna speed things up like you think it is. All right, so you'll thread a bunch on there until you get, however many sequins you want to start with. And then we are going to hold a strand from each ball of yarn together. And for the first round, we're not actually placing any of the sequins at all. We are just going to be sliding them out of the way a little bit. That is because at the top of the hat, that's where we sew the snap on. If you're using a pom-pom with a snap, or that's where you fasten the pom-pom, you won't be able to see the sequins anyway because it's going to be in the way. Also, it's just a little tricky to be managing your sequins when you are doing your first round. So it's just easier to just do a plain old first round without the fancy pants sequins. All right, so we're going to start with a slip knot. So I make myself a little sort of cursive E shape or little loop-de-loo. Then I fold it over onto the yarn that's connected to the ball. Then I slide my hook underneath that strand, and I hold my finger right up here where everything crosses over and kind of hold it in place. I'm going to make it a little smaller. And then I begin by just chaining one. That doesn't count as anything. That just anchors my stitch to that magic loop. or adjustable loop, or whatever you want to call that loop that you can adjust the size of. All right, so we're going to do 8 extended single crochets holding these 2 strands together as though they are one into this loop. So we're going to insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. I just realized that I forgot to mention what kind of hook I'm using here. This is a G hook. It's a 4mm hook, but you're going to use whatever size hook you need in order to get the gauge swatch to match mine, because you don't want to have any surprises when you're working on this hat. After you place that many sequins, it's really hard to tell actually when you first begin this hat how big the circumference is going to be. I'm just trying to convince you guys to make the gauge swatch so you know that it's going to be okay. Because when you start out making this hat, you can see here's all the sequins. It gets kind of ruffly. We do all of our increases at the very top of the hat, and that way we don't have to mess around with placing sequins in a certain pattern and trying to work our increases in there. It just would be too much of a mess. So we get all of our increases out of the way at the beginning of the hat, and it's really hard to tell when there's something that only has a few rounds in it how big the circumference is going to be. So you can't really just rely on knowing how big that circumference is going to be and measuring it as you go. You really should do a gauge swatch. And if I'm telling you to do a gauge swatch, you probably should do a gauge swatch, because I don't know if you guys have watched my other lives before, but I oftentimes will try to find ways of getting you out of doing the gauge swatch because I don't like doing them myself. But this is one time where it is important. All right, so we're doing extended single crochets. We've done 1 extended single crochet, and now we're going to do 7 more into our adjustable loop. All right, so we insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. That's another extended single crochet. Now we're going to do 6 more into that same loop. 1, and we'll just slide all these sequins down. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So now we have a total of 8. Sorry if that was confusing. We had already had 2, and then I started counting those extra 6, but we do need 8 single crochets. Then you can pull on that beginning yarn strand, and now is where the exciting part happens. This is where we start placing all those sequins. And as we work, we are going to be always looking at the same side. We're not turning in this section. We're just working in the round, always looking at the same side. And the side we're looking at, normally we call that the right side. But because of the way the sequins are placed, the sequins are going to end up on the back of our work. So this is really the right side, and we are always looking at the wrong side, if that makes sense. All right, so we're going to just grab 1 sequin here. And sometimes they like to stick together, so you kind of have to check and see if you really have more than 1. This is the part that makes it a little fiddly. And you know what? If you accidentally slide up 2 sequins and crochet them together, that's fine. It's not a big deal. It's just, the only thing with that is that you're going to end up having to put more sequins onto your yarn, which is fine. All right, so you slide your sequin all the way up to your hook, and it's going to kind of end up a little bit on the back of your work. Then we are going to work into that first stitch that we made, that first extended single crochet, and we're going to put 2 extended single crochet stitches in there. And each time we make an extended single crochet, right before we make it, we're going to slide up a sequin. Okay, so we've already slid that sequin right up next to the hook, and then we're going to insert our hook here into that first extended single crochet, yarn over, pull up a loop. So you can see already when I pulled up that loop, I trapped the sequin right on the back of my work there. Then we yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, so we're going to slide up the next sequin here. And in this round 2, we are going to be placing 2 extended single crochets into each stitch around. All right, so we've placed our first extended single crochet. Let me just grab a stitch marker here so we don't lose track of where we're at. So there's our first stitch of the round. And then we're going to do another extended single crochet into that same stitch we already worked into, okay? So that's right here. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. So now we have 2 sequins back there because we've placed them right before we did those last 2 stitches. All right, so we've done 2 stitches. So like I said before, we're doing 2 stitches into each stitch around. So we're going to slide up the next stitch, or slide up the next sequin. Oh, it looks like we have a question here. Any tips for those of us with vision or dexterity challenges in threading these sequins? Oh, okay. You can almost do them a little bit more by feel. You can, when you have that sequin in your hand, you can press the needle in and kind of swirl it around until you find the hole and pull it through. That's actually how I do it because my eyes aren't so super great either. So that's how I do it. I kind of do it more by feel a little bit to find that hole in the middle. But dexterity challenges, it might be pretty tricky to get these sequins on there. But I did find some slightly larger sequins. I think they're called paillettes, or that's spelled palettes, but I'm pretty sure that's not how you pronounce it. It's a French word. They're the flat sequins with the larger hole in it. Now you can get those, most of the time they come in very large, like they're almost like 3/4 of an inch wide or something. But I did find some on Amazon that were just only slightly larger than these sequins, and that's what I had originally intended on using, but then they disappeared off of Amazon and I couldn't find them again. So they are a little bit tricky to find, but it is worth, sometimes they pop up, or you might be able to find them at a craft store. But it would be worth looking for those because they have a much larger hole and they would be a lot easier to manage because they're slightly larger than these also. You could also do these with beads if you find that's easier, since you don't have the little tiny flat. Maybe it's a little bit more awkward to pick up a flat sequin. I hope that those tips help. The other thing too, you can actually, you can make this hat without the sequins. You could also, I think I have seen thinner yarns that already have some sequins thread onto them. So you could try combining one of those yarns. You could look for one of those yarns and combine it with another yarn held together with it to make the thickness here, because I think usually those sequin yarns are pretty thin. It's almost like a thread that you can hold with it. If you do that, you won't be able to control how, the sequins in this hat kind of gradiate from being a lot of sequins at the top to being less towards the bottom. So you won't really be able to do that, but it will be a really cute sequiny hat. All right, so back to round 2. We're putting 2 extended single crochets into each stitch, and before we make each stitch, we just slide that sequin right up next to the hook. And that one kind of slid itself up there. So 2 stitches, 2 extended single crochets into each stitch around on this second round here. The first round with the sequins. All right, so insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, place your sequin. So in this pattern, I have abbreviated PSESC, and what that means is place sequin extended single crochet. So it's basically like adding the motion of moving the sequin up and making the extended single crochet into one stitch. If it helps you though to think about it as 2 separate things, on the first couple rounds you are going to be just making 2 stitches into each stitch around, and you're placing a sequin in between each stitch that you make, if that makes sense. You make a stitch, place a sequin, make a stitch, place a sequin. All right, so we'll take a look at this in a minute. So you can see this is a little bit more slower going than it would normally be. But once you kind of get used to holding all these pieces and how to spread out the sequins, it does get easier. So don't be discouraged. And also the other thing too is it may seem like, oh my goodness, this hat is taking forever when you do the first couple of rounds, but that's because you're placing a sequin between each stitch. Or during each stitch you are placing a sequin, so that does take extra time. After a couple of rounds at the beginning, you're going to start putting less and less sequins in per round, and so it's going to go faster and faster. All right, so let's take a look at the back side of our work. This is, we're calling this side the right side because it has the sequins on it, and you can see all those little sequins kind of stacked up in a little swirl. So you're going to continue, you're going to finish that round, you're going to do another round. And if you are working on a size that isn't the baby size, that's the size that I'm going to be demonstrating today. If you're working on another size, you're going to do a third round of 2 extended single crochets into each stitch around. I'm just doing the baby size, so I did 2 rounds of that, and then on the next round, it would be round 4 for all the other sizes, round 3, let's see, 1, 2, oh, that's incorrect. Round 4 for the baby size. Let me just double check and make sure I'm telling you the right thing. I think it's round 4 for the baby size, and all the other sizes would be round 5. Yeah, round 4 for the baby sizes, and round 5 for the other sizes. You're going to be working different amounts of increases depending on the hat size you're working on. So I just want to show you really quickly here. If you are working on the baby size, which I am, you're going to do 2 place sequin extended single crochets in each of the next 7 stitches. Then you're going to make a place sequin extended single crochet into the next stitch 4 times. So what that means is you're increasing 7 times, and then you're just doing 1 stitch in the next stitch. You're not increasing that. And then you repeat that entire section within the brackets. So you're going to do that entire section within the brackets a total of 4 times, okay, for the baby size. For the other sizes, you're going to do different amounts of the non-increase stitches between your increase stitch. So if you take a look here, it says for toddler, child, adult, medium. This section here, it'll tell you 2 place sequins extended single crochet in the next stitch, place sequin extended single crochet into each of the next either 15 or 4 or 2 stitches. So that whole section, so this depends on the size you're making. So if you're doing a toddler size, you'll do it in the next 15 stitches. If you're doing the child size, it'll be 4 stitches. Adult, medium, every 2 stitches, okay? And then you're going to repeat what's inside that bracket either 4 or 12 or 20 times depending on whether you're making the toddler, the child, or the adult medium, okay? So I just wanted to explain that because sometimes when people are newer to reading patterns, they don't understand what all this crazy brackety parentheses stuff is. It can be a little confusing when you first start. So just know that your instructions, if you're following the toddler size, it's going to be outside of the parentheses, okay? It's going to be the first number. So here would be 15, here would be 4. If you're doing, say, the adult medium, it would be the last instruction inside the parentheses, okay? So here it would be 2, and here it would be 20 that you pay attention to. So it's going to be a different amount for the different sizes, but regardless, you're going to be working 2 of the sequin stitches in each stitch for a certain amount, and then you're just going to be doing 1 sequin stitch in a certain amount of stitches also. All right, so after you've worked through, let's say, it would be round 5 for the adult large, round 5 for the toddler, child, adult medium, or round 4 for the baby size. After you've completed that, then your piece should look like this, or it'll be larger for the little larger sizes, but you'll have some swirls around where you have 1 single crochet in each stitch around. Actually, this is, let me back up for a second. I'm sorry if this was confusing. This is right before we do our increase round, where it's a varying amount of increases, okay, per size. So because I'm working the baby size, I'll show you what that looks like here. So this, just to be clear, this is round number 4 for the baby size, all right? So, but this also applies to the other sizes, not the same stitch counts though. All right, so we're going to be working 2 of the place sequin extended single crochets in each of the next 7 stitches. All right, so we're going to slide those sequins up. We'll just give ourselves a few like that. And we'll do 1. Let's see, did we place 1? Oh, we got to place 1 before we do that stitch, sorry. Slide it all the way up to our hook. Because in this round, even when you're doing those increases per size, you are still placing a sequin in front of every stitch. Okay, so we're doing 2. There's 2 in the first stitch. And we're going to do that 6 more times. there's the first one of the next two. Let's see. All right, placing a sequin each time. And now we're placing another stitch into that same stitch. Let me put this in the first stitch of our round. It's right here. All right, so we've worked 4 stitches so far. We've worked into 2 stitches, 2 of the 7. All right, so there's the next one, and we have to have a second stitch in there. There we go. All right, so we've done 3 stitches so far. Well, we've done 6 stitches, but worked into 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And, oops. See how you can see these really like to stick together, and it's hard to know. You kind of have to have a good thumbnail in order to separate them, or just not worry about it, placing more than one at a time, which is fine too. All right, we're working in another stitch into that same stitch. And let's see, we're going to count how many we've done so far. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8. And we'll do 2 more in here. 1, and place the sequin. 2. The good thing is if you somehow mess things up and you have to rip out your stitches, then your sequins will be perfectly spaced and you can crochet it back up really quickly. At least there is a bonus, right? It does take some time. All right, I think we have a couple more stitches to work into, and then we're just going to do 1 stitch. Let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. All right, so this is our last stitch we're working into of the increases, okay? Okay, so we work into it once and a second time. There we go. Okay, so now we've worked 7 stitches, and we've worked into 7 stitches, but we've made 2 stitches into each of those 7 stitches. So we have 14 stitches so far. And then the next stitch is just 1 extended single crochet with the sequin. There's the sequin, and then we do 1 extended single crochet into the next stitch like that. Okay? So you're going to repeat that whatever that is between the brackets, you're going to repeat that all the way around until you get to your stitch marker. And you can see what it looks like on the back. We're still placing a sequin before we make each stitch around, okay? So after you've done that 1 round of, increasing in a different way per size, whatever size you're making, your piece will look like this. Let's see. There we go. Your piece will look like this. This is what it'll look like toward you. This is what it'll look like on the other side. So you can see there's 1 sequin in each stitch. And then you are going to work, this also includes the next, I think, 2 rounds. Let's see. If you look here, for all sizes, this is rounds 5 and 6 of the baby size. Okay, we're just placing a sequin and doing an extended single crochet in each stitch around. No increasing. We are all done with our increasing already. After we finish this round, that is where we're done with all the increasing for the hat. I know that seems crazy because this is so small, but it starts to ruffle, and the circumference will actually be pretty long if you actually measured into all those dips. And from then on out, you are just working 1 stitch into each stitch around, and whether you're placing a sequin per stitch or every other stitch, you'll just have to be reading the directions. But I'm going to explain that a little bit more to you, the pattern that we're going to follow here. So, All right, so we've already worked in this sample here, we've worked through rounds 5 and 6 of the baby size. So we've worked that crazy increase round, and then we've done 2 more rounds of 1 stitch into each stitch around, okay? After that, so this would be for round 7 for the baby size, we're going to be placing a sequin into the next stitch, and then we make an extended single crochet without a sequin into the next stitch, and then we repeat that all the way around. So basically what we're doing is we're making extended single crochets into each stitch around, but we're only placing a sequin every other time. All right, so in that round, we're going to place a sequin. Okay, let's see, I'm getting a little behind on my questions. What is extended single crochet? Okay, I'll show you that again in case you missed it in just a second. And then, yes, and great, my old eyes and arthritic hands, thank you very much. You are welcome. I hope that helps you. Do I need to worry about the yarn twisting while crocheting? Okay, yes. The yarn, well, you don't have to worry too much about it. It will start to twist around. Let's see. As you work, because you're normally working from the center of your yarn ball, or if your yarn is not allowed to roll around freely, it might start getting a twist in it, and then sometimes your strands can twist around each other. If that happens and you can't, and you're having a hard time untwisting it, usually you can fix that by just turning your entire work around like this and unspinning the two from being twisted around each other. You'll just have to look at which way it's twisted, twist your project around a couple of times, and then see if that's helping or if it's making it worse. Then twist it the other way around if it's making it worse, okay? So you can undo all that. The other thing you can do is you can cut one strand of yarn, pull them apart from each other, and add it back in, which is fine too. Extended single crochet, yes, we will go over that again. So here we are working the round, let's see, round 7, where we do a sequin extended single crochet, and then we just do an extended single crochet into the following stitch, and we repeat that over and over, okay? So we've placed our sequin for the first stitch. Here's an extended single crochet. We insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. And now remember, so that was our first stitch of this round, and now remember on the next stitch, we are not placing a sequin this time. This is the first time we're not placing a sequin before a stitch. We're just going to work a regular extended single crochet. So let me show you that one more time. Insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. That's an extended single crochet. And then we're going to keep repeating that. So we're going to slide up some sequins here so we have them a little closer to us. And then we're going to work 1 extended single crochet with the sequin, so right there, and then the next one, no sequin. We don't place a sequin this time. So insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. Okay, so we're just going to repeat that all the way around the circle. And let me do one more, and then I'll show you what it looks like, because I think it's a little hard to tell at this point what the pattern's going to look like. They're really sticking together here. All right, so we placed our sequin, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2, and then the next stitch is just a regular extended single crochet, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 1, yarn over, pull through 2. All right, so now, and sometimes your sequins will be not pulled all the way through to your work. You might find that, like this one, you might not even be able to really see that. I'm kind of looking down on the side of it, but if you pull it to the side, you can kind of pop it out to the front of your work there. So you might find yourself having to adjust a couple of the sequins when you look at it, if they didn't quite make it all the way through to the side of your work. All right, so you can see we have a sequin and a little space, and a sequin and a little space, and a sequin and a little space. So that is going to start dispersing the sequins with a little bit more space in between them. So you're going to work that round, and then you're going to do another round of the same thing where you're placing it where you're placing a sequin in every other stitch. But this time, the second round you do of that, it's going to be offset from the first round. Let me show you what I mean by that. So this shows after working round 8, Okay, in round 8, you start with an extended single crochet, just without a sequin, and then you place a sequin and do an extended single crochet, okay, and then you repeat that. So your first stitch of the next round is going to have no sequin, and then the following stitch will have a sequin. So you can tell if you're putting that in the right place. If you take a look here, you can see there's a sequin here and a sequin here. This was the last round, and then in between those two is a sequin from the previous round. So they should be, you know, interspersed, not stacked up right on in a row, but they should be interspersed evenly, basically, just a little off. Each row will be offset from the row before. All right, so you'll do another round of placing a sequin in every other stitch, and then after that, you're going to be placing a sequin in every 4th stitch. Okay, so we're going to take a look at round 9. We're going to place a sequin in the first stitch, and then we're going to extended single crochet into 3 stitches without sequins. Okay, so we're going to place that sequin right at the beginning. How do you add sequins after you start your work? Oh, okay, that's a very good question. I will show you that in just a minute, Debbie. Okay. All right, so we've placed our sequin, then we're going to do an extended single crochet. And then we are going to do 3 extended single crochets without placing a sequin. Let me mark that first stitch. All right, so we'll do an extended single crochet here. And in the next stitch, just keep sliding those sequins down. And in the next stitch. Okay, so we've placed a sequin, and we've done an extended single crochet, and then we've done 3 extended single crochets without placing a sequin. So it may be easier for you to think about it like you place a sequin and then you do 4 extended single crochets, if that makes sense. I think of it as that sequin is connected as part of that first extended single crochet, and then I do 3 more extended single crochets without placing the sequin. But however it makes more sense to you. But basically what you're doing is you're placing a sequin and then you're working 4 stitches. All right, so here's the first, and of course in this round and hereafter, we are not doing any increases. There's the second one, third one, and the 4th one. All right, let me show you the back here. So you can see there's bigger spaces now between our sequins. There's a sequin here, right by my stitch marker. There's a sequin here, and there's a sequin here. So they are not coming as frequently as they were before, okay? Because we're sort of, every time we go around, we're gonna have fewer and fewer sequins until we get to the bottom where there's no sequins. Okay, so let's go back to Debbie's question about adding the sequins after you've started. So let's say that, here I'm gonna just crochet this 1 sequin in here. Let's say that was the last of our sequins on our strand. Let's just ignore this little pile of sequins here. Let's just say we ran out. Okay, so now it's time to add some more sequins. So all you do is a little ways away from your hook, you're just gonna break your yarn, or you can cut your yarn if your yarn is not breakable, that's fine too. And then you're going to go back to placing that strand of yarn through the thread, just how you did before. Like that. And then you're going to add your sequins on. I only have 2 sequins left, so I'll just be showing you with 2 sequins. So you slide your sequins on, and then you can pull your needle back off. So now you have 1 strand that is still connected, because you were holding 2 strands together. You have 1 strand that's still connected, and then 1 strand that is no longer connected. So all you need to do is you can just start crocheting with this strand, but I'm going to back up 1 part of that last stitch, that last yarn over of the last stitch. So we're just going to pull that out. And we're going to pull out the top of the broken piece there, and we're going to add in the piece that has the new sequins on it. We're just going to lay that and hold it together with the other strand that was never broken, right? And then we're going to do a yarn over with those two together, just like that. And don't worry about where these yarn tails are. If they're on the outside of your work, the inside of your work, it doesn't matter, because when you weave them in, you can weave them into the inside. Just don't worry about those. You got enough stuff going on here. So after you've done that last yarn over, then you can continue with your new strand of yarn. I think we're doing 3 more extended single crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. And then you're just going to slide that sequin up, and then you would do that's your extended single crochet with the sequin, and then you do 3 more extended single crochets without sequins, okay, on this round. So basically all you need to do is you just break your yarn, but give yourself enough of a tail that you can weave it in, and then you thread it on just like how you did at the very beginning of the whole project, and then you just add that yarn back in. It's just like when you run out of yarn as you're working on any other project, you just have to add in a new strand of yarn. But that was a very good question. Thank you for asking that, Debbie. I meant to explain that, and I got a little sidetracked. So I'm glad you brought that up. See, this is why I really appreciate you guys putting your questions in the chat, because you can keep me on track. All right, so after you go all the way around, spacing your sequins out, so you'll be placing a sequin, extended single crocheting for 4 stitches. You do that all the way around, and then you're going to do kind of a similar thing on the next round when you are placing 1 sequin and doing extended single crochets in between your sequins. There's going to be 4 of them again on the next round, but they're going to be offset, just like we did before when we went every other stitch with a sequin. This time we are going to be crocheting around so that your sequin will end up in the middle of where the previous round had been. So let's take a look here. All right, so the last round that we were working on that I was showing you, let me get to the end of my strand here. All right, the last round that we were working on was this round here. You can see there's a sequin, a long space with no sequins, a sequin, okay? Then on the following round, your sequin should end up in between those 2 sequins all the way around, okay? So, and then after you do that round, and don't worry if this, the pattern will tell you exactly where to place your sequins, so you don't have to remember all of this stuff. That's why we have a pattern, so you can check it out. But I just want to explain these things to you just so that you can check and make sure things are turning out how they're supposed to. All right, so after you finish that second round where you space them every 4 stitches, then you're going to do a round where you make absolutely no sequins in at all. So you're just going to do a round of extended single crochet, and then you're going to do another round of placing the sequin at, between every 4 stitches again. So that will match the first round of that you did. So you can see here's a sequin here from that first round of spacing it every 4 stitches apart. And then we did the second one. We did a round of just plain extended single crochet. Now we're back to the placement of where the first round of those sequins placed every 4 stitches apart. Okay, and so depending on the size that you're making, you might repeat that again. So just follow your pattern. For the baby size, we only work a total of 4 rounds of the sequin every 4 stitches pattern. After that, you're going to do 1 round of just plain old extended single crochet. So let's see. Okay. All right. Debbie says, thank you for your answer. I am glad that helped out. Yes, and I'm so glad you asked that. Okay. So at the end of the crown of the hat, the top of the hat, everybody is going to end up with 1 round where there's no sequins placed whatsoever, where it's just an extended single crochet round. And then you just fasten off, okay? And then you're going to make the second part of the hat, which is the ribbing. So the ribbing looks like this. This might look super wide for a baby size, but it is going to get folded up like that. So let's begin. Let's see, I'll just use this yarn. I'm gonna show you how to work in this stitch pattern. This is just half double crochet worked through the back loop only. And if you've never heard of that before, that is totally fine. I'm going to show you how to do it. Again, we are using the same hook and we are holding our yarn together. This time we don't need any sequins. There's no sequins at all in the ribbed band. So that makes it go way faster. All right, so you're going to chain however many stitches your pattern tells you to. I think for mine it's chain 21, either 21, 23, 25, 27, or 29. For just the purposes of showing you the stitch pattern, I'm just going to chain, I don't know, maybe like 10 or so, just so you can get a feel for what this looks like. So you'll make your chain, and then that includes one chain that's going to count as basically a turning chain. We're going to start with the second chain from the hook, and we're going to work half double crochets across. Now I like to work into the bottom of my chain. What we're looking at here with all those V's on it, that's the top of the chain, and that's normally where we slide our hook under. Some people slide it under the back loop or the front loop, under both loops. But I pretty much always like to work underneath the back bump. So those are the horizontal dashes. If you roll your chain over, so it's sitting on the table upside down with the V's flat down onto the table, all these little horizontal dashes, those are the places where I insert my hook underneath. When I tell you to crochet into the bottom or the bottom bump, some people call this the back bump. Some people even call it the back loop, which I think is confusing because this I think is the back loop, but in crochet, there's lots of different terms for the same thing and it can be very confusing. All right, so we're gonna start in the second chain from the hook. So that's the first one. There's the second one, and we're going to do a half double crochet. So we're going to yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 3 stitches. Okay, so that's our first half double crochet. Let's do that again. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 3. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull up, yarn over, pull through 3. Okay, so we're just going to continue making half double crochet stitches all the way across into each of those back bumps or the bottom of the chain until you get to the end. And I made this hat in 2 pieces, which is kind of unusual for me. I oftentimes like to make things all in one piece if I can. But the reason I did that was because I thought it might make things a little easier for fitting the hat. Because it is so hard to tell because you do all those increases at the very beginning of the hat, it is hard to tell exactly what size your hat is going to be, unless of course you've done a gauge swatch, which I highly recommend. But I know that there's going to be people out there who are going to skip that anyway, and I wanted to make this a little easier on them. So the ribbing, you're going to make this back and forth and turn rows, and you can make this to whatever length you need to have it fit on your head. And then you sew it to the top part of the hat. So this is the part, of your hat that really matters what size it is. It needs to be smaller than your head size so it can fit really nicely. It can stretch to fit. So this way you can kind of adjust things as you're working on it at this point. All right, so I've worked a half double crochet into each stitch across. I've gotten to the end. Your piece will be much wider. This is just a sample. And then we are going to chain 2, and I like to chain these tightly. A chain 1 would also work here too. I used to do a chain 1, but I feel like my tight chain 2s look a little neater and tidier, so I like to do it that way. Then you're going to yarn over, and then you're going to insert your hook underneath the back loop only. So if you take a look at this, here's your 2 chains that we just made, those 2 tight little chains. This is the stitch where we would be working into. I'm going to insert my hook under just the back loop, which is right here. Okay, so this is where we normally put our hook, right there underneath both loops of the V. We're going to put it under just the back loop. So we're going to yarn over, place our hook in the back loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. And we're going to continue that, working through just that back loop all the way across. And this, working through the back loop, that allows it to have a little more stretch. It also gives it that sort of, the horizontal stripes in it that are characteristic of a ribbing. So that's why we're working it through that back loop. It helps the fabric be a little more stretchy, and it looks like ribbing there. So, and when you've gotten to the end, and I would recommend, if you're newer to crochet, keep a stitch marker in the first and the last stitch of each row. Your turning chain does not count as a stitch in this, so when you make your turning chain, think of your turning chain as just being a ladder. You're never going to work into those chains again. You're just using them to get up to the next level like this. So you'll chain 2. We're not going to work into those. We turn our work. We're skipping those turning chains, but we're working right into that back loop of the first stitch. Okay, so each row is the same. We're just working across half double crochets through that back loop. Okay, and you can start to see how we're getting that sort of striping going on here, the ribbing texture, like that. And you're gonna work back and forth until you've worked the proper amount of rows that your pattern calls for. And for the baby size, it would look like this. Okay, and we'll put our hook back in here. So this would be the last. We are looking at the side that we have just worked. We just worked across here. And now we are going to chain 1 and turn our work just like we're gonna work another row. But this time we are gonna take our foundation chain, which is here, and we're gonna place it on top of, in front of that last row that we worked. Now we are going to work slip stitches through. We're going to slide our hook through a little part of each stitch. We're only going through the back loop of the row in front and the back loop of the row behind. So we're going to insert our hook underneath that back loop and then underneath the back loop of the row behind. To connect them together, we're going to yarn over, pull through, and pull through the loop on the hook. So we're going to do that again. Insert your hook through the back loop and through the back loop of the row behind, and pull through. And we're going to work this all the way across. And if you don't particularly like doing this step, you could certainly just fasten off, and you could stitch the 2 shorter ends together with a tapestry needle. That would be perfectly fine. I find that this blends in pretty well, and it's a little faster for me to do. So I like to do it this way. Also, I think that most times it gives the ribbing just a little bit more stretch. You don't really have to worry about stretch in this direction too much, but it doesn't. Sometimes when you sew that up, you can, if you're not careful, you might be constricting your stitches just a little bit, and you can kind of see that. All right, we've almost worked across the whole thing, and we're going to end at the top. This is going to be the top section of our ribbing here. But actually, the top or the bottom doesn't really matter. The only reason that it's the top is because that's where our yarn tail is going to be. So it makes it a little bit easier to sew the top of the ribbing to the hat if we have that big long yarn tail. But if you find that one side of your ribbing looks much better than the other, then you can switch that around. That doesn't really matter. All right. So we're gonna cut our yarn over and pull through, leaving a nice long yarn tail. And then you can block your 2 pieces. You can do, if you made it out of acrylic, you can do a little steam block. You can also steam block wool if you like. I like to wet block my wool usually. Give it a little chance to dry after you do that. And then at this point, we're gonna sew the top to the ribbing. So let me just get this yarn out of the way here. So now we have 2 long strands to choose from, which is great because just in case we run out. I'm gonna tuck this strand underneath here. You could weave it in. It might seem strange that I am leaving the slip stitch seam that we just made on the outside of the hat, but the reason that I'm doing that is because it will really end up being hidden when we fold the brim up. So that's why it's just staying there on the outside. And it does not matter exactly where you match up the hat. I'm just going to match up my ending tail with my beginning tail here, and I'm going to sew in this direction, and then if I run out of yarn, I can sew in the opposite direction with the other strand of yarn. So in order to get these two to match up, you can see if we kind of walk our pieces along each other, the hat is actually larger up here than the ribbing. I wanted the ribbing to have to stretch to fit on the head, and this should just pretty much fit. So you are going to have to do a little bit of easing. So you can take a pin or you can use stitch markers for this if that makes it easier. And you're going to attach your hat together at this point. And then you can find, if you put that on one end and fold your piece flat, and fold your other piece flat, you can connect these two together. Even though this is longer up here compared to this, that's okay. You're just going to place the two together. You're just butting up the two edges. All right, and then, so now you've got those two connected, and you can just sort of stretch your ribbing out just a little and see where it wants to fit. And for the baby size, you really only need to pin this in about 4 places, but feel free to pin it all the way around if that's helpful to you. But for a larger size, the adult sizes, you probably will want to add some more, throw a few more pins in there. And just be careful that you're not pinning the 2 sides of it together. Like, you should still be able to put your hand in here. Make sure that it's not pinned through to the opposite side by accident. All right, so now to sew them together, you can choose whether you want to be looking at the right side or if you want to be looking at the wrong side. I like to sew mine together looking at the right side, and I'm just going to do a whip stitch between the 2 of them, leaving these 2 edges kind of butted up next to each other. You can see there's a little gap there where my finger is. You're just going to catch a stitch here and then catch part of the side of a stitch here and pull that through. So I made sure that I went through each stitch from the top part of the hat, and then just wherever it seems to connect to the bottom, that's where my needle comes out. You don't need to worry about, it's not going to match up 1 stitch per 1 stitch. That's just not, it's not going to match up. So don't try to match it up that way. Just go from 1 stitch. Make sure you're catching each of these stitches, and then wherever it lands on the other side is fine. All right, so I'm getting pretty close to the end. So if you guys have any questions, anything you're wondering about with this hat, or if you have anything else that you think I might be able to answer, then you can drop your questions in the chat box so that I can see that you need something answered. I'm just going to continue stitching these 2 together. Oh, like I was saying before, you can block each section of this first if that makes it easier for you. Or if your pieces seem to be pretty uneven, it might be a good idea to block them first so that you can match them up nicely and not worry about, if your pieces are pretty uneven, it would really help to block each piece separately first before you put them together. But if they look pretty okay to you, I would recommend just sewing them together like this and then blocking them once your hat is already complete. That's what I did on my hat up here, and it was fine. And I did a little test to see, because I wanted to recommend steam blocking acrylics, because if you're using an acrylic yarn, it makes a huge difference to steam block. Wet blocking doesn't really do that much for acrylic, in my opinion. And I did not want to recommend that without testing whether the steam would have problems with whether the sequins would have problems with the steam, but it seemed to be okay. I steamed my sequins and they didn't seem to change color or bleed or melt or anything like that. You definitely do not want to touch your iron to your work. You don't want to touch it to your yarn anyway, but certainly don't touch it to your sequins, because they'll probably just melt right onto your iron. You'll have a big mess. But I did end up, I wet blocked this hat, the blue hat here, and that worked really well for me. I actually like to block my hats over balloons sometimes, especially if they have a lot of gathering up at the top, like this kind of hat where you do all of your increases pretty much right at the start. It really helps to not have your hat flat on a table, or if you're blocking it flat, it works fine to block it flat, but you just don't want to intentionally block creases into the sides of your hat. So I find it is a little bit easier to block things if I can put it on something round. So if you are wet blocking something, you can take a balloon and blow it up and place your hat on top of the balloon and let it dry in a mug, just kind of balanced in a mug. That is one of my favorite ways to block hats. And that really makes the top of your hat look really nice. You just don't want to inflate your balloon so much that it's going to be larger than the head. You don't want to stretch out your yarn, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You don't want to stretch out your hat at all. You just want to make sure that it's gently draped over a small balloon. All right, so I'm running out of yarn here on this side. So I'm just going to weave that in here, and then I'm going to use the other side to go the opposite way on the hat. And this way, I mean, you can, if you forget to leave a yarn tail on one of them, if you remember by the second piece that you do to make a very long yarn tail, you should be able to stitch these together with your long yarn tail. But sometimes extra long yarn tails can be kind of cumbersome. So that's why I like to kind of do it in two sections like that. See, we've made it almost all the way around the hat. We just have a little bit more to stitch up here. And then we will talk about the pom-pom for a minute. And you could, I really liked how the faux fur pom-poms look, but you could certainly make your own pom-pom if you wanted to make it in a matching color. That would be fine too. I just have a few more stitches left to do. Remembering to catch each stitch from the top of the hat. Here we go. And then after you've gotten this all together, you could, and you block your hat, you're gonna block it. You can block it with the ribbing unfolded, or you can also block it with the ribbing folded up. If you block it with the ribbing folded up, then it will probably maintain that crease a little bit better. But if you're gonna block it on a balloon like I did, it might be hard to block it like that if it's a damp hat. So you could block it twice. You could block it once with the ribbing extended like how this is, and then later go in, fold up the ribbing, and just give it a little shot of steam or something to help it want to crease in that place. All right, so then we would weave in our ends, and every time I weave in my ends, I like to kind of split yarns a little to make it stay better and go in at least two different directions, because that helps it stay in place. But you can use whatever your method is for weaving in your ends here. I'm going to cut this off. All right, here's our cute little baby hat. And you can see these are some pretty pronounced, dips here, but once you block it, you can get some smaller little gathers. It won't look quite so, bumpy and uneven. Once you block it, it'll get like a smaller sort of gathered look, more like that. All right, so then when you want to add the pom-pom, you can, I just wanted to show you this real quick. This pom-pom that I have in the with a link in the pattern, it comes with a snap. So there's a snap already stitched onto your pom-pom, and then there's a snap that you sew onto your hat. So all you need to do is sew that on, you snap it together, your pom-pom is on your hat. There's another kind of pom-pom that's pretty common, which is this one. This has an elastic loop like this. So you can either sew that directly onto your hat, you can pull it through to the inside of your hat and then whip stitch it down. Or another method I like to use is you can sew a button to the inside of your hat and leave a little bit of a gap here. So you can see I just opened up that hole from the beginning adjustable loop. So that way you can pull the loop through and button it around the button, and you can take that off if you want to. Like say you wanted to wash the hat, but you didn't want to wash the pom-pom. That's a nice way to have a removable pom-pom. So there, that's what it would look like if we stitched our little pom-pom on. Isn't that super cute? Such a cute little baby hat. All right. Well, this was a super fun project for me. I know that it seems like it takes a long time to do all these sequins, but this is after you do all those increases at the beginning, you don't have to think so hard about where everything goes. This is a good project for watching a movie, placing those sequins. You just have to give yourself a little know ahead of time that it is going to take some extra time, but it's not a hard thing to do. And I hope you guys really enjoy making this hat. Thank you so much for joining me.